I'm Willem and this is a 2005 Aston Martin DB9 and today I'm going to take it for a drive. If you have not done so yet, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel, give it a like and drop a comment, I'd really appreciate it. So the Aston Martin DB9 was introduced in 2003 as a successor to the Aston Martin DB7. They actually skipped a class which would have been the DB8 because this car was seen as so advanced that they didn't have to do a DB8. The main reason for that was because the car was actually 25% or weighed 25% less than the outgoing DB7, but it was twice as rigid. But for me, the main thing that stands out is the looks of this car. The DB7 is a really good looking car, but I think this DB9 looks even better. I think it just looks absolutely amazing for a Grand Tourer. All the smooth lines around it, the shape of it, and I think the silver color looks really amazing on this car. I think this was a launch color as well. I really like the look of it. So like I said, I love the shape of this car because it's so smooth. There's not a lot of accessories and stuff around this car to exaggerate everything, but I like small details like this air outtake for the V12 engine that this car has. I think it's nice and subtle and I just really like of it, and it's a nice stylish sort of element to this car. The newer Aston Martin, the DB12, is also a really good looking car, but it almost looks like a DB9 with a lot of added extra accessories and creases and stuff, and I really like the fact that this car is still very understated. So coming to the front of the car, I think it looks absolutely amazing. It's got this sort of shark-like look to it. These headlamps sort of look like eyes in a way, and this big grille looks like a mouth. You also have these two sort of outtakes here at the top for the engine, and I think it just looks very nice. It's not overstated at all, and I think all the lines work really well on the front of this car. I love these lights as well. It's sort of tinted but not too much, and you sort of see these two xenons on each side. And yeah, I think it's an improvement over the DB7, which also looked very nice, and yeah, I really like it. So when opening up this amazing engine bay, you will find a 6-litre V12 Aston Martin engine. It is absolutely massive. It's huge fitted in there. You can't even see most of it. I think two of the cylinders are actually hidden behind in the back there, and I think they tried to fit it as center as possible, not too far in the front end because of all the weight. But it looks absolutely amazing. It says massive Aston Martin on each side. It's even got a little Aston Martin little badge there at the front, and it also says Aston Martin hand built in England. So this car obviously was still hand built in England, not the Aston Martin nowadays, I don't think. Most of them have Mercedes AMG engines, but this was still hand built in England, and it was built, or final inspection was done by Mick Freeman. So thank you very much, Mick Freeman, for that. So while we're taking a look at this beautiful V12 engine, let's take a listen to that exhaust note. So coming from the front to the back of this car, you'll see these wheel arches flare out quite a lot. The reason for that is because of these fat tires at the back. They're actually 275s, where at the front it's 235s. So that's the reason it comes out, but I think it really complements the look of this car. It just makes it look very sporty. I also like the fact that the fuel filler cap is here at the top, so you just can put in the fuel like that, not on the side of the car like you usually do. But I think it looks really cool. So while we're at the back of the car, we might as well have a look at the boot. It is a 2+2 and it is a Grand Tourer, so you'd expect to be some boot space. So just opening this up, we currently have some camera gear in here just to show you like how much space it can take. So it can take a few bags. I think for a weekend away it might fit one big bag in here, or maybe two smaller duffel bags as well. But I think they actually designed this space to fit a pair of golf clubs, because when you reach in here, it actually goes pretty deep. So if your club heads, if your golf bag is in here, your club head should actually be able to fit. So I think that was actually the whole design idea behind this boot. So coming down to the bottom of this car, you'll see that it only has two exhaust pipes, and they're quite small actually compared to modern cars, so nothing too pronounced and too show-offy, which I think suits this car's character very well. Cool, so before getting into the car to do the interior of the car, one of the last things you'll notice in the exterior are these door handles. These are something you actually see a lot nowadays, and I think Aston Martin were probably one of the first companies to introduce these, where you sort of press your finger on those two little markings there, and then it opens up like this. To me, it always sort of feels like you're going to break the door handle when you open it up, because the door is quite heavy, but I mean, at least it looks quite smooth and it blends into the car and the body nicely. So seeing that this car is a Grand Tourer and a 2+2, you might want to fit some people in the back. So let's see if that is actually possible. So I'll just open the door here and put the seat back, or put the seat forward at least. Not the fastest. Put that back or forward. Let's try to get in. I've actually made my way back in the Aston Martin DB9. As you can see, it's not the most comfortable place to be in. I think my toes are literally stuck under the seat. If you really hate someone, then you can maybe fit someone back in here and tell them you're going to go for a drive. But I would not recommend this for any humans. So looking at the steering wheel of this car, it's covered in leather. It actually feels relatively small. It's a fully round shape. It's not a flat bottom. Which is what you see mostly nowadays. It's got a few buttons on here, but not as much as most modern cars do. And it's got a small Aston Martin logo in the middle, so it is quite nice and tasteful. I quite like it. It's got paddles here at the back as well. They do feel like aluminium paddles, but there's a sort of rubber piece on them as well, which I would have just taken away. I think it would have felt much nicer. It was just like plain pure pieces of aluminium. And then looking at front, you see the speedometers and the instrument cluster, speedometer on the left and the rev counter on the right. Something that is really cool is they both go in opposite directions. So if you rev, the speed counter goes to the left and the rev counter to the right, and that actually looks really cool. It's got two tiny screens there in the middle, not a lot of info. I mean, you can see the kilometers per hour, that's also digital, but then obviously you do have your analog dial there. And not a lot going on, but I really like the brushed aluminium it's got all over the place. So also covered in aluminium, it makes it age very well. This car is almost 20 years old now, and I think these analog gauges looks and works for an older car like this. So looking at the center dashboard, you'll notice it's covered in wood and this aluminium sort of like material and some plastics as well, but I think it aged really well. This wood actually does feel solid. It's not a fake plasticky wood, and it's not covered in some shiny sort of gloss. It's just pure, and I really like it. You'll see a couple of buttons here at the bottom as well for your drive, your neutral, your reverse and park. Nowadays you have some knobs or buttons in another place, but here you have it right next to the stop start button, which is also very cool. It's got a nice Aston Martin logo in the middle, and I think it's made of, I'm not sure if that's plastic or glass, probably plastic, but I like the way it looks. Then moving down from that, a lot more plastic here at the bottom here. The buttons, you do have some brushed aluminium buttons which do feel solid and age really nice. You've got a nice clock here in the middle as well, and just basic radio functionality and a CD player as well. So no big infotainment screen or anything like that. This was just too early for that era. And you see some basic plasticky buttons here to change your radio functions and stuff like that as well. So moving down from the instrument cluster, talk a little bit about practicality of this car. You'll see a little area here where you can hold your keys or your wallet or whatever, and a little place for your credit cards as well, and a couple of more buttons to open the boot. And yeah, I mean, not a lot of practicality in this car, but I think more than enough if you're talking about a sports car. You also have this little sort of ashtray here with a power outlet, a V12 power outlet. So moving down from that, we've got a few buttons here. We've got a button for park distance control. We've got a sport button that we'll test out later, so pressing that it's going to be some fun. And then we've got your rear window defogger here as well. And that's pretty much all when it comes to buttons. So driving the Aston Martin DB9, I've actually reviewed Aston Martin DB9 before, also a 2005 version. That was my very first car review that I shot, which I was very proud of. One of the things that happened in that review is I had a GoPro and the audio actually didn't work. It only worked for the first few minutes of the last section of the video. So I got back home, I gave the car back. I only had the car for a day, and when I checked the audio, I only had 2 minutes of footage, which I used at the end of the video, which I was super depressed about. But I put the video out in any case, and yeah, I'm very proud of the video except that part. So I think this is a good time for me to redeem myself on the driving part of that video. So driving the DB9, the first thing you'll notice is how smooth it actually drives. It is a grand touring car. You'll feel some bumps if there's some irrigations, and you know, if you go over gravel or whatever, you'll feel it. But I mean, it's not an uncomfortable car at all. These seats are really, really nice and comfortable. I have to say that they support you a lot. So I can see you doing long drives with this car, whether it be across Europe or in South Africa. You can drive all the way to Namibia if you want. But yeah, this car is a really, really nice, comfortable cruising car that I would recommend for anyone who drives for long distances. So I mean, this car being a sports car, there isn't a lot of functionality in this car like modern day sports cars nowadays have, like Sport and Sport Plus and, you know, individual settings and all of that. There's only one button down here and it's called Sport. So I press that and you can feel the throttle response pick up a little bit. You can actually hear the car, the engine make a bit more noise as well. We've got a few corners coming up here, so let's test that out. Got some pedals at the top here as well, so if I drop it down to third, this engine is an absolute beast. Wow, it is amazing. I now understand why you would buy this car, and it's literally for this V12 naturally aspirated engine. It really makes an amazing noise, and I was actually shocked about how it puts you back in your seat. I mean, this car is almost 20 years old now, and I think nothing beats a naturally aspirated engine. Obviously all modern day cars now have turbochargers in them. You know, we have emissions policies and stuff, and you can't get away from that. But in one of these older cars, you can pick them up with these V12s. I mean, there's nothing like it at all. So with this car, like I said, being 25% lighter than the outgoing DB7, and being more rigid, you can really feel that when you go around corners in this car. I mean, it feels planted on the road. It really does feel solid. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart in any way. And I mean, that engine just pushes you through the corners, and it's really nice. The steering isn't bad either. It's meant as a, you know, a grand touring car. It's not meant to be driven, you know, like a hooligan around each and every corner, but I mean, this car can definitely do it. It feels super solid, so I won't mind doing that in a car like this. An interesting fact about this car, when it came out, there wasn't really a lot of competitors in the Grand Tourer scheme of things. You had the Ferrari Scaglietti, the 612, which was a lot more expensive at the time. I think nowadays it's almost the same price. That car depreciated into the ground when it came out new. And you also had the Bentley Continental GT, which came out at the same time, which would have been a competitor for this. I would think the Bentley Continental would have been more a competitor for this car than the Ferrari Scaglietti, just because they're sort of both British cars, and yeah, they sort of had the same look and feel. If I had my money on it, I would have bought a DB9 just because of the way it looks. I think it's way much better looking than both of those cars. I think the Ferrari looks very nice as well, but it doesn't have the clean lines and everything that this DB9 has. The Bentley Continental GT is also an okay looking car, but it doesn't flow like this car, and I wouldn't really compare it to this car looks wise. So talking about power and horsepower figures, this car has 456 horsepower. It's got 540 Newton meters of torque, which I think is more than enough for a Grand Tourer car like this. I don't really think you need more than that. It's got a lot. It also revs nice and high because it's got a naturally aspirated V12. I think it goes all the way up to 8,000 RPMs, which is great for a car like this if you've got enough road to actually do that. And yeah, I mean, prices of these cars has dropped quite significantly since release. You can pick this car up now for less than R1 million, or even less than 800 or 900,000 Rand for a few examples in the market, which I think if you're buying this car, you're buying it for the V12 engine, and it's a pretty good bargain. This car is very low mileage. It only has 18,000 kilometers on the clock, so that's literally 1,000 kilometers per year if you take into account the car's age of 18 years, which means this car probably just stood around and didn't get driven a lot. So it's a very, very nice example in that aspect. You do need to take into account it is made in England, so you don't always know about reliability for cars like this. But yeah, I mean, if you're comfortable with that, I wouldn't see a problem in buying this car. Because the way it drives still feels super solid. I mean, the performance is really, it put me back in my seat. I wasn't expecting that much from a car like this. I would have expected it to feel a lot less brutal than it actually does. But I mean, going into another corner here, just listen to that V12 engine. That is just an absolutely amazing sound, and I think that'll put a smile on anyone's face when driving a car like this. So yeah, worth considering a car like this if you've got the money to spend, if you are aware of the prices of these cars, I mean, of what they can cost in the aftermarket. You need to find someone that can service this car for you well. These parts are expensive and things might and will break in the long term, but just taking all of those things into consideration, the looks of this car, the engine, the little bit of practicality that you have, I don't think it's a bad buy at all if you have plus minus R1 million to spare. So yeah, I think it's really a car to consider. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to taking another car for a drive soon.